Hi folks, so we're on to task 2, activity 4 of the Understanding Money unit, which is still on tax, and it's all about forms that you get related to tax, so kind of government documents that you get related to tax. Okay, so it's about two forms, one of them a P60 and one of them is called a P45. So let's have a read here. So every PAYE pays you earned taxpayer, so that's basically anyone who's employed by an employer and pays tax, so the vast majority of people, they receive a form called a P60 from their employer at the end of each tax year, so it's the end of after April the 5th. The P60 shows you how much tax they have paid in the last tax year, and it's important that they keep this record safe. Okay, your P60 is used basically anytime you apply for a loan or a mortgage. For example, if you guys were going away to college or university or something like that and you wanted a student loan and you had some sort of job up to now, even if it's a part-time job, and you were applying for a student loan, they would probably ask you for this P60 because it shows you how much tax you have paid in each tax year, basically, and it's kind of proof of earnings, basically, is what it is. So very important to keep this document safe and in a safe place when you do get given it by your employer. So you should get one of those each tax year, and you may have heard this is kind of more commonly known form called a P45. When someone leaves their job, they'll be given a form P45 by their former employer. You may have heard the phrase, give them their P45. That basically means sack them, okay? Because you get your P45 when you leave a job. So if you ever hear that phrase, I got my P45, it basically means you've left that employer. But what a P45 actually is a form that your former employer has to give you. And in terms of tax, it just states how much the person has earned and how much tax they've paid during that current tax year. Okay, and these two forms are very important because when you go to a new job, you're expected to show them your P45 as basically proof that you have left your previous job. And also, if there are any problems with your tax code, which happened to me when I had two jobs when I was younger, I had to get my P60, my P45 to kind of prove how much tax I was paying. So two very important forms that are important to keep safe. So before we do calculations, I want to actually get you to write down two statements of what these are, because these are important things to understand. So P60, it basically tells you how much tax you've paid each tax year. Okay, so it details how much tax you've paid each tax year. Okay, the difference between a P60 and a P45 is basically you will get a P60 every year, regardless of, so if you stay in a job for 5 years, you should get a P60 given to you, each of those 5 years. Whereas a P45 you only get when you leave an employer. Okay, so you only get when you leave an employer. Okay, so it's kind of commonly called a kind of negative thing to get your P45 because it means you've left your job. Only get when you leave an employer. But in terms of tax, it shows, or details, I should say, how much tax you've paid in the current tax year. Details how much tax you've paid. Copy down these definitions, please. Okay, so details how much tax you paid each tax year. So I'll maybe add to the P60, you'll get one every year. You'll get one every year. And P45, you only get it when you leave an employer and it tells you how much tax. So that's just a good definition on the difference of them. Now we're going to look at an example. So Teresa has a job with a salary of £20,000. per year, and she pays PAYE, pay as you earn tax, just means she pays tax. And Teresa gets the standard personal allowance, okay? Now, we're doing another one of these tax calculations. So it says if Teresa stays in her job for the whole year, she would get her P60 from her employer at the end of the tax year. With a salary of £20,000, taking into account the current tax bands and the standard personal allowance, etc., how much tax would you expect her to pay for the current tax year? Okay, so we've got another one of these tax calculations to do. So we can set up a little kind of table the same way as we did before. So if we say that this represents Teresa's salary, so this represents £20,000. Now remember, for income tax, the personal allowance, this personal allowance is £12,500 in the current tax year. That's for 2020-2021. So Teresa gets £12,500 where she doesn't have to pay any tax on, as does everyone. And then whatever's left, remember, whatever in this box is just how much more money there is up to her salary. So it's how much more money, it's basically just whatever is left and to get to 20,000. So all you have to do to get in this box is do the salary, take away the allowance. Okay, so it's 20,000, take away 12,500. So use your calculator for that, and that gives you 7,500 that's left over, and that is the amount that we're actually going to get taxed on assuming we're at just the basic rate of tax, which is 20%. Okay, so now I just need to work this out. So this calculation now just becomes 20% of 7,500. So again, work that out anyway. You do 20 divided by 100. We can quickly just change that to the decimal as 0.20 times 7,500. So times by 0.20, and it's just 1,500. So another one of those tax calculations. So at P60, if you got that at the end of the tax year, would say that Teresa paid £1,500 in income tax. Okay, question number 2 says, however, if Teresa leaves her work after 7 months of the current tax year, what would you expect the P45 to say she's paid? So she's not staying for the full year in this case, so she doesn't pay as much as this. All you basically have to do is you have to get what it would be for a full year, divide by 12 to get it would be for 1 month, and then just multiply up by 7 to get to 7 months. Okay, so it's just like 7 out of 12 of the kind of full amount. Okay, so if we can set it up like this, so 12 months in tax would be 1,500. Well, we're going to go back and say, what would 1 month be? Just basic proportion. So 1 month would just be 1,500 divided by 12. So if she only worked for 1 month, she would only pay £125 in tax. But actually she's there for 7 months, so now we just take her 1 month and multiply that by 7. So it's 125 times 7. That's just how much she'd pay over 7 months, so it's £875. Okay, so I'll go through that again. We know that in 12 months, it would be, because this is per year, isn't it, this tax? So we know 12 months she would pay 1,500. So how much would 1 month be? We would just do the 1,500 divided by the 12 to give you £125. Then if I wanted to know 7 months, I would just times it by 7. If I wanted to know 8 months, I would times that by 8. If I wanted to know 10 months, I would times that by 10. Okay, so it's just using proportion. So find 1 month and then just multiply up for whatever number you're asked for. And that give us, in this case, £875 would say on her P45. Okay, so what I'd like you to do now is on the next page, I have a very similar example that I'd like you to do now. Okay, so this is task 2, activity 4, P60 and P45. Now this is just basically your question to do. So let's read it. This, sorry, I'm gonna, oops, what have I done? Right, so here's the question. So Rob has a job, so I need you to copy this down basically. So Rob has a job as a construction worker and earns £18,000 per year. So Rob pays PAYE tax and has the standard personal allowance. So basically exact same as Teresa there, but just slightly lower salary. So how much tax would you expect Rob's P60 to say that he paid over the full year in the current tax year? So do exactly what you've just done for Teresa, work out the tax in the current year, but for a salary of £18,000. Then in part B, if Rob leaves the job after 6 months, how much tax would Rob's P45 say he has paid over that time? So similar to what we just did there, rather than 7 months, we're working it out for 6 months. So how much would it be for 12 months? That's in part A. Then how much would it be for 1 month? Then multiply up to get you 6 months. Okay, pause the video now please and try this question. Okay, so we'll now go over the solution to this question, okay, similar to activity 2, activity 4 with Teresa with the P60 and P45. So let's do it. Rob's salary is £18,000, so we're going to put that in the box. Now remember, the box is made up of the personal allowance plus whatever's left over to get up to 18,000. So Rob's personal allowance is the same as everybody for the current tax year. It's £12,500 and there's no tax paid on that amount of earnings. What is left over, well remember to get the leftover bit, it's the salary which is in the top, take away the personal allowance. So that's in this case 18,000, take away 12,500. So what goes in the box is 18,000, take away 12,500, and that's going to be 5,500, and that's going to be taxed at 20%. Okay, so then actually to figure out the income tax that he has to, that the P60 would say he's paid over the full year, it would be 20% of 5,500. So that's going to be 0.20, 20 divided by 100 times 5,500. So that gives me 1,100 per year. So the P60 would say to Rob, you have paid £1,100 in tax over the full year. Okay, if Rob was to leave after 6 months, okay, what would it say that he's paid? How much tax would this P45 say when he leaves his job? The employer would give him his P45 and it would tell him how much tax he's paid over the current year after 6 months. So what would that be? Well, we know that 12 months is 1,100. 1 month is 1,100 divided by 12. So that's coming out at £91.67 for 1 month. So for 6 months, we would just times that by 6. So hopefully you managed to get this as well for your final answer of £550 for 6 months. Now you may have been able to get that quicker by, in this case, because it's 6 months, that's exactly half of a year. So you could have actually just halved your full year, but it's, you know, not often going to be 6 months. So it's better to use this proportion. So hopefully you got on with that question okay, and you're feeling a bit better about these income tax calculations.